Joel, I want to start with you if I can and play a comment made by your climate spokesman, Chris Bowen, to my colleague Laura Jays a little bit earlier today.
We've got a lot more to announce. We'll be announcing the mechanisms, the policies, and we'll be announcing the roadmap to 2050. But the essential starting point is net zero 2050. I mean, that's the essential starting point. That should be the basics. That should be just the bare minimum.
Well, do you agree with that? Is net zero the bare minimum? Is there a secret plan for an even bigger commitment that he's let the cat out of the bag?
No, I don't think so, Peter. That's the first time I've seen that. I think that interview took place while we were in the party room meeting this morning. But I think what Chris Bowen is saying there is that you've got to set the ambition and then you build the investment framework to reach your goal. I don't think you were suggesting in any way that, I mean, how can you have more than zero net emissions? You know, zero net emissions is as good as it gets. Remembering that the net is all about making sure we put no more
you can move the time
emissions
frame
into the atmosphere. Oh, well, you can shorten the time frame, but that's not what he was saying, Peter.
Well, I hope not. I mean, he was the guy that the worst record on illegal boat arrivals when he was immigration minister.
Let me give you this.
I don't hold him in high regard.
If he was saying that, he's wrong and I'm opposed to it. Okay, but I don't believe he was saying that. Okay.
All right, good man. I want to go, Alex, if I can. Your colleague, National Party MP Matt Canavan, asked a pertinent question on Twitter last night about how much wealthy investors might expect to make from net zero emissions agenda. Will you stand, he says, against a net zero target 2050? Interestingly enough, you know, there is a lot of people that are banking on this target, quite literally banking on this target. That's also what's not often talked about enough, in my view. People in the media in particular, people in politics with a vested interest in net zero 2050.
Yeah, well, it does beg the question. He's a naughty boy, Matt. He likes to throw those little grenades out on Twitter every now and then, causes grief for the rest of us. But look, I think in many respects he's absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in renewables at the moment, a lot of money, and those wind farms and solar farms, they do not build themselves, and they do not build themselves without subsidy, sadly, as well. So, look, I take his point. I tend to agree with him on that. And look, I think if we were to be marching down this road, looking at a nuclear option, so to speak, for want of a better way of putting it, we would be talking about a very different language, but that might upset the business model.
I was talking about this at the top of the show, Joel. Quite an extraordinary treatment of a former Deputy Prime Minister, Mark Vaile. He was appointed as the next Chancellor of Newcastle University. He's been torpedoed, though, now by climate activists. He won't take up the position. Real concerted campaign, students, academics, university administrators, all because he's the chair of a coal company, Whitehaven Coal. Now, I understand you want to make a statement to the House of Representatives on this very issue later tonight. Can you give us a sense of what you're going to say?
I certainly will, Peter, and I'm really angry about this. Out of respect for the university and the Vice-Chancellor and for Mark Vaile, I've stayed quiet throughout this process, but now it's sadly done and dusted and Mark Vaile has withdrawn. I intend to express my very strong views. This is a new form of modern-day McCarthyism. This is about blacklisting people who have had an association with the coal mining industry. It was a shrill, uninformed and misleading campaign. And, you know, when we demonise Mark Vaile for being associated with the coal mining industry, we demonise also all those, the tens of thousands who work within the industry or in support industries associated with the coal mining sector. And all those who have done so, Peter, should hang their heads in shame. And there's another point here too. We are having exponential growth in renewables across the country and indeed within the Hunter region. But most of the investment across the world is coming from corporations which have been traditionally heavily involved in mining, oil and gas. So what is this concept of that we should have been happy Mark Vaile is coming out of the coal mining industry to back in the university strategic plans in this area, but rather than co-opt him and use his capacity, we've chosen to demonise him, to blacklist him. It's a disgrace and it's a slippery slope, Peter. Who is the final arbiter of these things? And what's next? The oil and gas industry? abattoirs, because animal welfare rights activists don't like that. The steel industry, energy-intensive sectors like the aluminium smelters. Where does this end, Peter? This is outrageous. It has to stop.
Well, we've lost the ability to disagree with civility. We've lost the ability, I think, around the country to have fair and reasonable debate, to talk. I mean, let's use nuclear as a good example, Alex Antic, to have a debate, a grown-up adult debate about where we go in terms of energy. If we're going to take fossil fuels out of our economy to reduce emissions, if we think that's what we should do, then why on earth aren't we having a grown-up conversation about nuclear power? I know it was started at some time ago in South Australia, but cancelling people's not the answer.
No, it's sure not, Peter, and you're quite right. I mean, I think one of the reasons we're not is simply because there isn't the bipartisan support. No criticism of Joel, but if Labor and the Greens were happy to take this for what it is, and that is low emission, safe, cheap, reliable power, we would have a discussion about it, and we could have a discussion about it in a frank manner, and we could decide whether or not this was something that really had a future. And of course, that hinges on cost base, it hinges on a whole other range of things. But I mean, ultimately, what we see here is, the Green left, I think, trying to have their ideological cake and eat it too. They want low emissions, they want net zero by 2050, but they're not prepared to try this option, which actually does work and does provide cheap baseload power. We should be talking about it. We should be talking about it more. It's a shame we're not.
Well, let's
Peter,
stay with the whole issue of
Alex doesn't have to pay respect to me, because I'm actually a member of the Parliamentary Friends of Nuclear Energy, and I've been calling for the lifting of the nonsensical general prohibition on nuclear energy. People proposing investment in nuclear power should be able to go through the same consultation and environmental processes and safety processes as any other industrial investor. There shouldn't be one rule for them and another rule for others.
Yeah.
Joel Fitzgibbon, every day that I listen to you, there's more people out there in my audience screaming for you to get onto the Labor front bench. You're far too sensible to sit on the back bench.